October 18th, I spoke for my first time about my story at a domestic violence vigil and kind of informed my town of what was happening and that I was facing prison time, although I didn't really think that was going to happen.
Good evening. So my name is Shauna Boatwright, and I grew up here in Rantoul, and some of you might know me as Shauna Larson, thinking about switching back to that name. I first want to say thank you so much for inviting me to speak. When I was asked to speak, I said yes without thinking, and then I was like, what did I just sign up for? You guys don't know this, but you're going to be a very memorable part of my journey tonight, and that's because this is the first time I'm speaking publicly about my story. And so I'm a little nervous. I love public speaking, but I'm a little nervous. That being said, I'm going to give you the elevator version because my story is massive. So this is the elevator version, but if you would like to speak to me after, please feel free. I'm an open book. So I am the 75%. I grew up in a household where I heard my mother being abused by my father. I used to wake up to hearing her raped, beaten, all of the things. Some of my very earliest childhood memories is my mother being abused, but that's her story, so I'm not going to share that. But what I can say is that I am that 75%, and it was my goal. I remember sitting in my bedroom sometimes hearing them fight and say, I'm going to find me a good man one day, and I'm going to get out of here. And so I worked really hard to get out of Rantoul, but I am glad to be back. And while, as families that become broken goes, I did at one point end up in the care of my father. And for 3 years, I hid the fact that I was being sexually abused by him every single day for 3 years of my life, and in all of the ways. Child pornography, my pictures were sold in child sex rings, and finally one day, kudos to the Rantoul Police Department, they saved my life. I got the courage to tell, and they did an amazing job, and he did 25 years, which is remarkable. A lot of times child molesters get 3 years, 6 years. He did 25 years and was just released this past Valentine's Day, which I've always hated that holiday, but now I realize there was probably a reason I hated it. So he is released now, but I have nothing to do with him. And so I moved away. I was the first person in my family to go to college. I got my undergraduate degrees in women's studies and sociology with a minor in counseling psychology, and I went on and got my master's in social work, and I was going to change the world. And I finally got a job at the federal prison, and I thought I made it. I did the thing. I rose above my abuse, and I met a man. And he, also another statistic that came up, was an Army Ranger, and he was a hometown hero where we lived, and in Indiana. And we both worked at the federal prison, and we were the Barbie and Ken of that place, right? I was on top of the world. I was making good money. I was with a well-respected man who seemed stable on the outside. I refer to Facebook as fake book nowadays. Because even when I was going through the things I went through, I was sharing like I was the happiest thing ever, happiest person ever on Facebook. I think in a way to give him some kind of like accolade, so maybe he'd be happy with me. But anyway, it slowly started to worsen while I was with him. When you talk about seeing red flags, I was the season pass holder to 6 red flags with that man. But I thought I could love him through it, right? Because I had been through all of the things, and I knew I had baggage. So if people are going to accept my baggage, I have to accept his baggage. And so I started to see things poke out, and I could get into all of the ways that I was abused, but I actually have a more important message that I want to get to. So just know it was very, very scary. And it got worse when I got pregnant. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He never actually hurt me. His tactic was leaving guns all over the house, never putting them in the safe. Maybe putting his hands around my neck, but not squeezing. Maybe letting me know what he could do, making sure I knew I was at the bottom of the food chain. He used to tell me that. So on April 1st of 2020, because I got a job promotion and he did not want to ride his wife's coattails, he pulled a gun on me. I saw the bottom of the barrel of the gun, and then he pulled it on himself. And in that moment, I did not call the police. And that's always a comment that people want to ask survivors. Why didn't you call the police? Well, my training, I was a hostage negotiator. I did crisis work, and my training kicked in. And I thought, well, I could call the police, but there's a whole thing, suicide by cop, and all. I'm thinking of my children who are up in their bed, sound asleep, and I loved him, and I didn't know what was happening. So needless to say, I didn't call the cops, but I did run home to mom the next day. And so that's a whole story that I'm not going to get into, but it did lead me to finally move out, which it takes 7 to 12 times for a victim to leave her abuser. And he made it difficult for me to leave. He had me on surveillance. He was taking old phones and connecting them to our Wi-Fi and watching my every message, and I had no idea. So he knew where I was moving to. So what the message I really want to get to anybody that's in here is that a lot of people think we just got to get them gone out of the house. But my nightmare started when I left. When I left, my real hell kicked in. So we worked together. And because, and I'm not taking a shot at the law enforcement, but because I was a woman in a man's world in there, since I left him, I must be a Jezebel, cheating son of a witch, right? And so they took, his side because, well, he was an Army veteran and all the things, we just have to side with him. And they discarded anything that he did to me. So I didn't have a lot of places to turn for help, and he would know if I was at work, if I wasn't at work. And so I was then assaulted by a coworker, which people have said that he put them up to. I can't let myself believe that. I'm not even going to go down that road, but it did happen. So I find myself on the anniversary of my father's prison sentencing, laying in a hospital, being assaulted by a coworker that I had worked with closely for 8 years, with signs of being strangled, a black eye, and blunt force trauma to my face. And even still then, I tried to press charges, and it got swept under the rug. So at that point, my mother and my brother said, move home. Like, who cares about money? Move home. So I did. And when I informed him of that, then he busted into my apartment and threatened me with an inch of my life. His family is very wealthy, and, well, I'm not. And so I thought of my 2 children that I had with me, and I want to give you a sidebar of statistics really fast, and then I'm going to go back to my story. So violence perpetrated against women and girls can put them at risk for incarceration because their survival strategies are routinely criminalized. There is a massive movement about women who are incarcerated, and studies being shown of women who commit their first illegal act to flee domestic violence or to get out of an unsafe situation. 94% of some women's prison populations have a history of physical or sexual abuse before being incarcerated. 94% of the women. 525 abused women at a mental health center who had committed at least one crime. Nearly half had been coerced into committing crimes by their batterers as part of a structural sequence of actions in a climate of terror and diminished, violated sense of self. And at New York's Rikers Island found that most of the domestic violence survivors interviewed reported engaging in illegal activity in response to experiences of abuse, threat of violence, or coercion by a male partner. I want to bring that up because I found myself in that situation, and this is the first time I have been public about it. I don't have the answer, but the communication, us as a community, something has to happen. So I found myself in this spot. I went to the Terre Haute victim advocacy office, and they didn't want to help me because I was moving to Illinois. I came to Illinois, they didn't want to help me because the case was in Indiana. So I fell in through the cracks, because let me tell you what happened. I went to my boss's boss, I went to the police, And nobody did anything. The only thing anybody did was my boss said, "Do you need time off of work?" So I had an inmate make me an offer. I said no until I didn't. And I am a public official who accepted a bribe so I could get money for an attorney to come home with my children and be safe. And on October 25th this month, I will be sentenced, and I am going to be a felon, and I've never been in trouble for anything in my entire life. And meanwhile, the people who have abused and assaulted me are going to have federal retirements, and they'll probably all show up to, continue to humiliate and abuse me. Because here's the thing, is that he is the father of my two beautiful children, and every other week I get to see him and exchange, and I still take flack because now I've been in trouble legally. So it's taught me a lot. It's humbled me. I've done a lot of therapy, let me tell you. I'm still proud of who I am, and I know I did what I did, but I truly feel like a felon through the cracks. And I know this, just like I did when I was a little girl and I was being molested by my father. I grew up and did everything I can to help children, and I'm trying very hard to be a good mother to my young children, because it is cyclical, and I do not want my children to be in a dangerous situation, because my son is going to treat women the way he has watched women be treated, and my daughter is going to allow what I allow. And so I just want to really encourage, like you said, us as a community. I don't know the answers, but I know I slipped through the cracks, and just like I did when I was a child, as a woman, I'm going to continue to be an advocate, felon or not, coming up. I'm going to continue to be a social worker and an advocate and try to make Frantoul proud. But I just really encourage you guys to reach out to those that you're concerned about and fight the good fight. I don't really know how to end this, but thank you so much for listening.
And October 25th was my sentencing. And that is the day that I was sentenced to a year and a day in federal prison.